Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all those watching and listening. My name is Miles Ilorah, and I'm joined together by my two co-hosts. To my left, we've got
Matthew Henley.
And to my right, we've got
Aviwe Ntloko.
And together we make up the core. Together we make up the core. And welcome to episode 1. So today, the books that we're going to be breaking down are, as you can see in front of you. So each of us read one of those different books. I read the book to my right, to your left, probably. Better Than Before, the blue book over there by Gretchen Rubin.
And
okay.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I read Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah, I read The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Charles Duhigg.
It'd be very awkward if you weren't.
Dude. Well, that's spelled Duhigg, so.
Hey, man.
I just hope he doesn't find your Instagram, bro.
It's the thought that counts. At least you put it out there.
Yeah.
At least I read his book.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's all that matters. You got him
Yeah,
paid. You got him
dude.
paid. And you actually bought the book. Like you
Yeah.
bought it.
Yes,
you
I
didn't-
didn't pirate it,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
is very important.
Very proud of you for doing that.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about a lot of the lessons that we learned, but I think more so the lessons are going to be tailored around what are habits and why are they important. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the 3 different perspectives of these authors through the lenses of which we've read, as well as our own experiences. I guess that's the question on the table. Basically, what are habits?
What are habits?
Should I say it too?
Eh?
Because everyone's saying what are habits. No one has answers.
You need to emphasize.
So, I mean, in my book, it gives a very short definition of habits, and it says habits are basically activities or behaviors that you engage in regularly and even automatically in your life. I think a nice thing that he also mentioned was that habits is the compound interest of your growth or self-improvement.
Okay.
But we'll get into that later.
I was
yeah.
going to say,
Yeah.
you can't
We'll
just
get
say
into-
some
yeah.
deep stuff and then not explain what it means.
No. We'll get into that later.
Cool. So I've got I decided, let me actually look up the dictionary definition of what a habit is. So
Yeah.
according to Merriam-Webster, it is a settled tendency or practice or an automatic response to a situation. I think the key word in that definition is automatic. I think we all knew we were gonna be speaking about that particular thing, and I think that's why I wanted to get the denotative meaning of what a habit is, because I haven't read their books, but I'm pretty sure along the lines of everything that you've learned from those books, this idea of automated responses that removes the need for you to actively do it is kind of the foundation of what a habit is. I think once you break it down into its actual core meaning, the core. Once you break
How cliche, bro.
I had to. I'm sorry. I saw the
You have to
opportunity.
squeeze it in there, right? You have to squeeze it in.
It's advertising, bro.
They know us.
But once you break it down into its actual core meaning, I think that's when you can appreciate what it's meant to do for you and for your life. So that's the denotative meaning. I don't know. You wanted to say something before I jumped in.
Yeah, no, I was just going to elaborate further on the not necessarily the definition of what a habit is, but just, understanding it. And it wasn't highlighted explicitly in the book, but what I could gather from what was being said throughout the book was that basically a habit is an activity that you're doing, as you alluded to, but it kind of involves low brain activity. So you're not necessarily thinking too much about it. It's something that you've just kind of ingrained into your daily routines or your daily activities. So they're kind of things that are done without thought behind it. Obviously you can, in the initial phase of forming a habit, have that thought process of how you're going to be doing it, or have that process where you need to think it through. But once a habit is set, it's kind of a low brain activity. It's just you're not really thinking about it.
Yeah.
And it kind of more or less occurs at the subconscious level. So
Yeah, definitely an automatic automatic behavior.
Yeah.
No, fully, because I think the same thing was kind of said in my book, where she also kind of highlighted that low brain activity. The way she kind of described it is that it removes the need for self-control, which I think was a very, very important thing, because habits, by virtue of them being an automated process, means that you don't need to actively bring yourself out to do it, because it just happens on its own. This becomes particularly important when you look at what self-control is and what it requires from you. So self-control, I think she described it very nicely, and I think I can somewhat apply it to my own life as well, which is, it's this idea that you have a finite amount of energy that you can exert to make yourself do an activity. When you start the day, usually your self-control might be at its highest. Maybe not necessarily in the first hour, because you're still groggy, you're still waking up. But as soon as the day has actively started, that's probably when your self-control is going to be at the highest, because you're still fresh and you still have the energy to make active decisions that could be congruent with where you want to go. But as the day goes on, the more activities stress you out, the more anxious you become, or the more things you engage with, the more that self-control starts to dwindle. Typically, when we look at our behaviors, if you look at any type of stressful behavior, whether it's a good or a bad habit, you'll often find yourself falling back on that when you're stressed. And it's because when you're stressed, habits remove the need for you to have any sort of self-control in that particular situation. Now, it's great if stress, for example, moves you towards a good habit. So you'll see that some people who are stressed, they'll go to the gym, because for them, it removes, like it's a comforting activity that removes any need for them to actively make a choice to do something. Yeah. So they fall back on that and they go to the gym, they de-stress because they've been there. You might also find that somebody else has the bad habit, like for example myself. Sometimes when I'm stressed, bad habits is I'll overeat or I'll overindulge in certain things. And
I haven't seen you have a mukbang, bro.
What?
I'm saying I haven't seen him have a mukbang. And he's
like, I was having such a great trainer though. No, it's fine. I don't have a mukbang, by the way, please. But it's for me, like sometimes I'll overindulge in particular activities. So for example, eating, and there's a comfort that comes from that because it's an automated response that I know I do in response to stressful activities, but it doesn't necessarily bring me a desired outcome. So the stress tends to be a longer term consequence in the future. Yeah. And I think that's where the delineation between good and bad habits become. But that important thing of, once you start to lose your ability to regulate your self-control because the day has taken its toll on you, habits kind of become the fallback mechanism by which you can regain your comfort. And therefore it becomes very, very important for you to make sure that the habits you've cultivated are ones that when you do fall back on them, they don't take you backwards, they take you forwards. And I think that's sort of what I'm starting to get, is like the importance of habits, because people always talk about it all the time. You need to have good habits. You never really understand why. Really, you know. Yeah. So
I think another reason why habits are kind of important is that because it's a low brain activity, those are the kind of things that you need throughout your day in order to like sustain your energy, for example, because your brain consumes a lot of energy. We know that it's a high functioning organ. So if you keep on having to exercise it for every task that you do, then you're probably going to burn out throughout the day. And as you mentioned that, like when you're in these high stressful moments, you kind of like fall back onto something, and that's always going to be your habits. And I think like having good and bad habits it's unfortunate, but we all have bad habits. It is what it is. And I just think that another thing to remember is that when you're forming habits, you don't delete your old habits or like your bad habits. You don't delete them. You just kind of like override them with new habits. And unfortunately, in high stressful situations, your brain somehow wants to go back to that old habits. Wants to go back to its roots, man. Wants to go back to the old habits. And that was kind of like outlined in the book that I read. I think it was in the 3rd chapter of the book. It was the golden rule. It was called the golden rule of habit change. That chapter. And it basically outlines how a team called the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for those that don't know, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are an NFL team, American football team, and historically they've been like a poor performing team. Like historically wise, they are the worst franchise in all sports. In all sports, like literally. But the thing is,
man, I can think of some pretty bad teams, so that's a
hey, dude,
that's a big title.
They were so, but historically wise. Okay. But I think it was in the early 2000s they had a new head coach, and when he came on board, he wanted to enforce this thing of changing your habits, and through habit change, you'll find better performance, and that's what he tried to do with his team. Obviously, at first, when they come in with these new systems, they don't take off. At first it kind of stumbles along, but then as the season progresses, you begin to see how them forming these new habits in what they do and making things more automatic, that it's kind of now showing on the field in terms of their performance. They're now getting the results. But the thing is that when you do get to like the final, when the team eventually got to the final, the Super Bowl, they would go back to their old habits. And they wouldn't perform. Like, dude.
Choke.
Like you wouldn't perform how you've been performing throughout the whole season. And the thing is, when you are in those high, stressful environments, and we spoke about it like earlier today, you know, the tennis guys?
Oh,
yeah. Like we talk about it all the time.
Tennis players.
Tennis players, like the young guys, you see that they're good. They have so much promise. They make it throughout the whole tournament performing well.
Technical
they get
skills
to the final. They're versing Rafael Nadal or Novak Djokovic, and then they're like poor. They're just poor performers.
It's not poor,
but they just.
But you know, that's actually so relatable because I remember, like, I used to be a high school debater, and it was a very similar situation throughout the whole tournament, doing well. Then there came a situation. I can't actually remember the context behind it, but it was like, we were forced to debate against, well, not forced, that makes it sound bad, but like we ended up
man didn't choose his opponent.
No, like we had to end up debating against, like, I think one of the head coaches, and he was brilliant. Like he was amazing, you know. And I remember for the first time in my life I choked. Like I stood there, I said nothing.
No way.
Bro, I ran out the room, dog. I'm not even kidding. I fully ran out the room.
Like my guy went blank, bro.
He went blank and he ran.
And it was so painful. I don't know what happened. Like I literally
But wait, was this like in a formal setting? Because like if you're versing your coach,
it was a formal setting. Like it was a formal debate. Like it was for
formal debate.
Yeah,
for marks.
It was for points, you know, for the team. And we were facing him because I think we had, I don't know if we didn't have enough players or what happened. But they were like, hey man, you guys need to.
So they put in the last level.
And that the thing is, we were one of the better teams there. So I think that's why they expected
us to do it. And those curveballs will throw you off completely, dude. They throw you off completely.
Yeah.
And I think there were a lot of other factors. I think I was also just going through like a phase of self-doubt and whatnot. But I just remember at that particular point in time, like all of the good habits, or let me not even say habits, but all of the good performances that I had at the time, they just fizzled out. And it's like I suddenly forgot how to debate. I just didn't know what to say. I was umming and ahhing in ways that I've never ummed and ahed. And next thing, I'm holding my paper and you just hear
and your body language was probably off at the same time. So that all reflected.
I think that's where like when you are in those situations, if you build your foundation off of habits, the good thing is that your habits would help you or assist you in navigating through those stressful moments.
It's a foundation.
But the book that I read, he mentioned that the key to overcoming in those situations is belief. Because those high stressful situations, we can talk about the tennis players, go back to them. when you're on the court and you see your idol on the other side, you're playing against Rafael Nadal, right? The thing is, all the habits that you learned, or yes, you might have taken the approach of practicing through habit, but once you get there, you're gonna kind of like crumble under the pressure.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is rooted in belief, because you might not yes, you can perform well, but if you don't believe that you're going to beat the person on the other side of the
you
net,
definitely will.
You definitely will.
And then you're going to start overthinking things. And then what's supposed to be a low brain activity then becomes a high brain activity. And that's how you find that people, now you're getting tired more quickly than you're supposed to. And you end up overthinking things. You end up doing things that you didn't even learn. Because your brain is now trying to scavenge and find, trying to find the next answer. And then your habits just kind of get chucked out the window like that.
Yeah. I just want to go back to that point where you spoke about the Buccaneers. I had a similar analogy put in the Atomic Habits, where he speaks about the 2003 British cycling team. So they bring in a new coach.
Oh, you can tell Males wrote your books, bro.
Sports. Dude, love it.
Yeah, that's the only examples these guys have. Yeah, even like the examples they put in, it's always like gymming, money. Okay. Anyway, so in the book he speaks about the 2003 British cycling team, and they kind of bring on a coach as they've had like a really bad history preceding that, and the coach brings on this philosophy called the aggregation of marginal gains. And what the philosophy entails is that you basically try to improve at every little thing that you do. So when he came onto that team, he basically came in and revamped everything. So he literally would hire a surgeon to teach them how to wash their hands, if I have hand movements or whatever. When they would train, he would put like body suits on them that could kind of detect their heat temperature, so that he knew which outfits they would have to wear on race day, and like tailor to each person. And then even like with the bus, he would paint the bus that transported the bicycles white, so that you could see the dust. And if there's dust that accumulates, then you know that, okay, the equipment is not like in tip-top shape. And throughout the season and the years that he stayed, the team did gradually improve, and they ended up winning the Tour de France. Well, the leader of the British cycling team did win the Tour de France eventually. So it's just that philosophy of like improving every little thing that you do that could come together and produce this really big result.
That's so crazy, because like my author takes like a completely different approach to that. Where, I mean, she does speak about the importance of like wanting to make yourself better in everything, but she speaks about, and I think this goes back to the self-control thing, where if you have a finite amount of this thing, if you look at just like the nature of habits, especially when you're trying to cultivate them, they're almost always going to be difficult to cultivate. Almost always. And it's like, it doesn't even matter what the habit is. It could be something as simple as
brushing your teeth.
I was going to, how did you know that was going to
Dude, something like, basic. Whenever you talk about habits, brushing your teeth is like everyone's go-to. Like, you know, like motivation, people that want to motivate you and stuff. But I'm going to tell you about brushing your teeth.
And if it's not that, making your bed, always and it's genuinely, those are like some of the simplest habits to do.
They're difficult.
But they're very difficult to actually cultivate, which tells you just the act of trying to make a new habit tends to be a very difficult process. So then she speaks about the fact that if this is what you're going to do, you ultimately want to target a habit that is going to feed into the creation of other habits, just by virtue of how, like, the nature of that habit. So if you look at most people, most of us, we want to sleep more. We want to be able to get 7 hours of sleep. That's something that almost everybody wants, because we all understand the importance of being able to rest more. So and a habit she would speak about is try to be more active, or something like that. Not an easy habit to cultivate, but when you look at what it does in terms of being able to, number one, just exercising consistently in and of itself does wonders for your self-confidence, which then does wonders for your ability to be more disciplined, because now you believe that you're worth the discipline that you're putting into the exercise and every other thing that you're doing. It also increases your ability to go to sleep, because you're more tired at the end of the day. So now you have the ability to cultivate the habit of sleeping on time, because you've done this particular thing. If you're also cultivating the idea of preserving your body and being more healthy, the habit of brushing your teeth becomes easier, because it's also along the same line of preserving body and making sure that you're healthier. So she's like, you want to make sure that the foundational habits that you build are the kinds that trickle into all of the different aspects of your life, so that when you do want to start now tackling the smaller things, the return for which you're doing it is, or rather, let me phrase it like this: when you do create a habit, you want to make sure that the return from that habit is worth the effort that you're putting into it, because it's almost as though almost all of them require so much from you to do, but they don't all give you a massive return. Like, let's be honest, like, you don't feel like 100 times better because you made your bed in the morning. You know what I mean? Like, it's great. It's a great feeling. It's definitely,
but as you said, it's what it does.
It's what it does.
The other habits.
Exactly. And that's what you ultimately want to identify. Now, that could be different things for different people, because I think a lot of us also have our own personal vices. So, for example, there might be people who are alcoholics. There might be people who are chronic smokers, or whatever the case may be. And tackling that specific habit could trickle down into so many other things, because you could be somebody who, for example, exercises. Well, I'm spitballing. This is definitely not to anybody out there, but like, you could be somebody who exercises very well, but you battle it with your drinking or your smoking or any other vice that you might identify in your own life. And by virtue of you battling with that particular vice, it almost feels like it negatively feedbacks on all the other things that you're doing, and it takes away from that. So by working on that particular habit or vice or whatever it is that you may have, it trickles down into the other things. And so that's why she speaks about attacking the bigger things, so that the smaller things eventually have more meaning and don't take as much effort for you to work on.
And that's another thing that Jordan Peterson also kind of alludes to, is that we like to separate these things into like bigger things and smaller things, or important things or things that are less important. So something like brushing your teeth, or like, we probably all brush our teeth every day, but the process in which you go about brushing your teeth, making sure you get the top row nice, the back, your tongue, and all of that stuff. If you try and get that habit, because it's a low brain activity task, those are the type of things that we look at like they're mundane tasks, or they're small, they're not that important. But that's the thing, you don't understand the trickling effect that they have.
That's also true.
Yeah. And in my book, much later on in the book, Charles kind of speaks about it, and he's termed it like Keystone habits. So basically, the Keystone
habits.
Yeah, it's like a foundation. Yeah. So it's like Keystone habits, whereby these habits, once they've taken action or once they've been implemented, they have this like trickling effect, where they like, you kind of see how you know, like in terms of the habit loop he speaks about, like the habit loop, that's how he's broken up habits into a cue, routine, and reward. And I'm sure we're going to touch on that a little just now. But yeah, basically that process and the good things that you kind of get from that process of these small tasks makes it much more easier to perform them or get the habits going with the much bigger tasks, because you now have an understanding as to how the habits are working, and it's much more easier to implement them on a much more difficult task if you can get it right on the smaller tasks, like brushing your teeth, making your bed, for example.
Okay, so I think we've done something important here. I think we've spoken about the different perspectives that these authors have brought, as well as our own personal experience. And I think what these things then culminate into is habits essentially being the foundation by which you're able to like create change in your life. That change can be good or bad, but habits are ultimately the foundation upon which we're able to change, because they ultimately then free us from the need to make decisions. So that's basically what we can then agree that a habit is in the bigger scheme of things. And the reason it is that is because of that automated process, which is why it's the keyword in the definition, the denotative definition of it. So now you touched on something very important, which was the process by which a habit forms, which is just a cue.
Charles Duhigg calls it the habit loop. So he breaks a habit into the habit loop, and you have your cue, your routine, and your reward.
I think your book has something very similar, does it not?
Yeah. So mine was cue, response, and then I believe reward, but it was along the same lines, just that he adds in an extra. Oh, it's actually cue, response, action, reward. so he adds in the action in terms of the cycle.
Yeah, no. So my author, she doesn't say
action
about
reward.
That. She doesn't have
Yeah.
that.
Action reward.
Action. then
Yeah,
reward.
I think it's just the different terms because mine's routine reward.
Okay.
Routine reward.
So like it's just basically
It's probably
doing
the same
something.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. My author, she talks about. She doesn't talk about. She doesn't talk about.
Doesn't talk about.
She doesn't do that.
You're feeling left out
Completely
there.
different
You're feeling left out
approach.
No.
there. Anyway, us that are having this conversation about the habit loop, let's
You guys
What
literally were
cues?
looking at each other, man. I saw the
Like-
bromance, but it's fine. I won't even. But I think
ostracizing.
let's actually break that down
We'll
I
talk
think,
about it.
Yeah, because I think that's a very important part of defining what habits are, and I think ultimately why they're important. So, you two being the people who have like had these, I think, concepts broken down in your respective books. I think you guys look somewhat lead this conversation a bit more, and I'll try and jump on. But break down what this means. The cue,
the habit loop.
yeah, the habit loop. Break
the
it
habit
down.
loop. Yeah. So basically, it's like the habit loop. The best way I can describe it to you is through examples,
Yeah.
whereby you just see how there is a cue, routine, and reward.
Can you give one from your personal life, if I? Yeah.
Personal life? Okay. For example, I wake up in the morning, right,
Mm.
and that's usually my cue.
Mm-hmm.
Waking up, that's my cue to brush my teeth,
Mm.
and then I will brush my teeth. That's the routine, right?
Mm.
And the reward I get for performing that routine is I have minty fresh breath, and my mouth feels clean. It's not fuzzy. It's
Yeah.
exactly. So that's basically what a cue, routine, reward, habit loop is, and it's basically for almost all the tasks that you do. So gymming, for example, let's say after school, let's say you're done with campus, you come back to your room. That's usually like a cue. When I used to gym, that was my cue.
Oh, used to.
Yeah, I used to. There's a reason why I stopped going to the gym. There's a reason why. That's because I stopped getting the reward. Yeah, I stopped getting the reward because I had urticaria. So instead of feeling good afterwards,
you medically cannot gym. That's actually so wild.
dude. Like, no, not that you can't gym, but you need to.
You're allergic to sweat, bro.
You need to, yeah. So you need to do certain things to prevent or mitigate the urticaria that you get from performing like high energy or like physical activities. But yeah, so basically that's how it's broken up. So for gymming, for example, when I used to go to the gym often, and it's actually a good way to like, for my situation that I had in terms of my habits of going to the gym, it's a good example because like you get to see how when you mess up the one part of it, it like kind
trickles.
it trickles into the routine and you don't want to perform the routine anymore.
Yeah.
So like because I wasn't getting the reward, I then wasn't performing the routine because I need, the routine to get the reward. But now since I was performing the routine but I wasn't getting the reward, it's not a task that I kind of valued in my life. Or like, I didn't want to get itchy after going to the gym. So I was like, I'm not going to go to the gym, then I'm not going to get itchy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And did it have that trickling effect that we were speaking about, like when you did stop going to the gym?
It kind of messed up like a whole lot of other stuff. Like
Yeah.
you kind of see that when you do get your life together, you start putting things together here and there. One of the things was physical activity because after high school, they kind of forced you to play sports and be involved in extracurricular activities. But then once you got to university, it's something you needed to do yourself. And it's something that I neglected. And then I was like, okay, I need to get back into the gym. So then when I went back into the gym, I got that habit going. Fair enough. Got comfortable. It became my routine. But then came the urticaria. And then,
for those who don't know,
can
you describe what urticaria is?
Ooh.
Briefly, I'm sorry.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
not
it's cool. It's cool, man.
asking.
Yeah, it's cool. It's not too personal, so it's fine. So basically what I have is cholinergic urticaria. So basically the best way I can describe it to you is when you perform activities, certain chemicals get released in your body due to your muscle fibers are contracting and all of that stuff. And a build-up of those chemicals, my body mounts an immune response to those chemicals. So whenever I perform an activity and I run or whatever, then I'll get that immune response. And the immune response manifests as urticaria. So you get like hives, you get itchy, wherever you like sweating and stuff, it gets red, it gets swollen, that kind of stuff. It does get bad, but I don't get it too bad. Like there are cases.
I mean, it stopped you from going to the gym.
But it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, but I mean,
like
some people can get like bronchospasms and stuff.
Yeah, like they could
like,
die.
Like it's
like
it's a proper
anaphylactic
allergic reaction. Yeah, you could get an anaphylactic reaction to it.
Yeah,
but yeah, I just get hives and super itchy.
Okay.
And stuff. So yeah, that's basically what stopped me from going to the gym.
Yeah, I wish I had a stronger reason. Mine is just flimsy. Just got lazy,
dude. And the thing is, this is why I said it's a great example to use, because the book also talks about developing a brain craving, right? And once you kind of get those, by performing habit loops or getting your habit loop in order, you then get the anticipation of the reward. Because now, let's say you're sitting at home, now you want that endorphin rush. You start seeking it, and that's the craving. And I used to get that craving that I need to go to the gym. I need to go to the gym.
Yeah,
but I knew what was waiting for me wasn't gonna be that reward. So like me performing the task wasn't gonna get me that reward.
Yeah.
So I didn't perform the task.
Yeah.
You know what's sorry to interrupt you, but you know what's so important about that is now this highlights the next domain of habits that become very, very important in understanding what they are and why they tend to govern our lives. So when you speak about this from the perspective of saying this is no longer going to bring me the reward, that takes a level of self-awareness. And I think it's easy to be self-aware in this particular thing because, number one, the activity is strenuous, being the gym, and number two, the consequence is painful, being the hives.
Yeah.
It becomes very difficult when we look at other habits that we have, particularly the ones we would classify as negative habits, where the activity might not necessarily be strenuous and the outcome might not be immediately bad for you, but in the long run has a lot of its own other types of consequences that it takes on you. And I think this is where the self-awareness becomes very, very important to identify what these activities look like, because I think that's what makes them so insidious for us. It's that ultimately, you know, I think
it's like you're not just, you might be taking, let's say you taking a W in a task now. Well, you perceive yourself as taking a W in a task now. But it's not just that task. It's like the task of all tasks. It's like the summation of all
exactly,
tasks.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, yes, but not doing this now, okay, who cares? But later on, you're going to get the effects of it. You're going to see the effects.
Which is also like one of the reasons why people actually struggle with forming new habits, is because when you actually try to take the first step in forming one habit, there's no immediate tangible reward that you get sometimes. And that's why it's so easy for you to just fall back.
What's a delayed response? Sometimes it's a delayed response. Like, it's not something you're going to get now, but maybe tomorrow, like gymming, for example. Gymming's a prime example to use, man. It's a prime example to use. Like, at first, when you go to the gym, you don't get that, that feel-good feeling after the gym. You just feel tired.
Yeah.
But after like a week in the gym, you start getting that feel-good feeling, where it's like after the gym, you actually feel somewhat energized.
Still don't get it.
but this is why it's so important, because you mentioned something now, which is it's difficult to form a habit because you don't necessarily get the feel good immediately. But there are habits that you get the feel good immediately, and usually those tend to be like the more negative habits. So for example, a very good example of one of those habits that afflicts most of the male population, pornography. That's one of those things where the feel good element is there immediately. Like, there's literally, I know it's a very touchy subject.
I know it's personal, bro.
I know it's a very touchy subject, but I think it's a very important subject. Because it afflicts so many people, so many people, and I think the population of which at which it's affecting people is growing because the access is there.
Yeah, it's the access. I think it's the internet, and also Instagram, even you're not even on the application looking for these things, but it's getting thrown at you.
And even if you don't even want to use pornography as an example, we can use things like Instagram, like just as an app, or social media as another example.
They're literally cues.
They're literally cues. Like you wake up, sometimes the cue is pick up my phone, and what that would be the routine, I guess. You pick up your phone, and then the first thing you're gonna do is open Instagram, or you open WhatsApp, and the response would be the reward would be whatever dopamine release you get from whatever it is you see from scrolling and fulfilling the habit of doing this with your thumbs.
And then eventually it becomes a craving.
So
because you do it so much, you then now start looking at your phone.
Do you know how many
even
times
when you don't get a notification?
Dog, do you know how many times I've looked up at the phone that's busy recording us right now? And I'm just like, and that's the thing. I think that's a very important delineation to make, that oftentimes we often perceive that habits are going to be, they're going to have like their effects be more long term. But those tend to be the habits that require a lot of active effort for you to create. And usually, more often than not, or not all the time, but usually more often than not, those are the ones that end up being good habits or good for you. But then you get those other ones where the response is so quick that you don't even have time to register that you've completed the loop already.
Yeah, it literally expedites the whole process. So
and it's so easy to keep repeating that loop until a couple of years down the line you're stuck in it, and now you have no idea how to get out. And you're not even aware that like this process has just been engraved in your brain multiple times over. I think that's also a very important part for us to like identify, because as I said, like it's easy to see the delayed reactions, but it's the small insidious ones where you get those immediate dopamine hits that often catch us, and that's where the addictions form.
Yeah, those are the easiest ones. So in Atomic Habits, my pronunciation's been off, bro. It's like just off. But
you're hungry, bro. It's fine.
Yeah, it's like
there's only one video that comes to mind, bro.
No, we're not gonna bring that up. Can't bring that up. Nah. They don't know it. They've never seen it. They're not gonna see it. It's gonna stay in the archives.
It's gonna come out.
It's gonna come out, dude.
Then one of y'all must have leaked it. Then I'll know that.
Yeah,
we're not gonna leak it. We're gonna release it. Leaking is hiding. Leaking is like you're hiding. We're not gonna hide, bro.
Put it on the page and provide the link for people to watch it.
You also respect me. So in Atomic Habits, James Clear, he breaks it up in that way where he says cue, craving, response, and then the reward. So I kind of butchered it up there earlier. So with the cue, it's also like when you wake up in the morning, you say with your phone, or even something as mundane as walking into a dark room. The cue is the darkness, and the craving is you'd want to see. And then you flip the switch, which is the response, and then the reward is you can actually see. So even with people that are addicted to gambling, hearing the slots machine, that's a cue, which triggers a craving, which is, I want to go see what's going on there, or I want to go try my luck.
It's like that, the anticipation for the reward. You start thinking of the reward already.
You start thinking of the reward already. So that's what the craving is. And then the response is to actually go there and then get the reward. So I like the way he did break it up, because when you kind of break it up into 4 parts, then you kind of see where you fail at each point. So when your phone just rings and you automatically look, you're failing at the cue point. As soon as your phone like vibrates, that's your cue.
That's wild.
Then where it's like it rings, you look at it, contemplate, then you're failing at the and then if you do pick it up, then you failed at the craving point, you followed through. But if you don't pick it up, then okay, you can resist the craving. So I like the way that he put it out in that sense.
That's actually I like that a lot. I like that a lot.
I think it's also important to analyze like why, breaking it up into cue, routine, reward. You have it as cue, craving, response, reward. Yeah. Those different factors. When it's nice, or it's a good way to kind of like intervene with your habits. It's a good starting point. You at least, because you at least now have an understanding as to why you are doing certain things, and how you go about doing them.
Yeah.
So the book that I read, in terms of like changing your habits and stuff, the way he suggests you should approach it is by like kind of breaking it up. That's the way I would approach it. Is you kind of break it up into your cue. In my book, it was mentioned as cue, routine, reward. And then you can basically change your routine but keep the cue and the reward. So for example, if you want that feel good feeling that you get from gym, you can get it from other activities as well, but this is a for gym kind of example. And that's basically that feel good feeling that you get, that is the reward, right? So you're gonna have to keep that reward, because if you try and change the reward, you're gonna go back to seeking that reward through the old habits that you initially had in place before gymming.
Okay.
Right? And then you can change the routine to get that reward and keep the cue the same as well. So for example, if you came back from campus and you, let's say, ate sweets or took a nap, and then you woke up after a nap and you're like, I feel good, that's a feel good feeling you got after a nap, but your cue was the same coming back from campus. If you change the routine, cue, routine, reward. If you change the routine, but keep the cue and the reward the same,
So now I want to challenge you there, because this is particularly like applicable to you, where the gym, the reward of gym no longer fits the routine, or rather, the routine of gym no longer fits the reward. That you would have gotten.
I don't get the reward.
Yeah. So
the routine,
knowing that the reward is what you want, what would you actively replace gym with? Because it probably wouldn't be napping.
What do you mean?
So what would you replace the gymming with, if you were to get the same reward? Is what I'm asking you.
Oh, in that situation, I know that I need to gym, so I need to find a way to mitigate. Because like getting itches and that stuff is, yes, it's a good enough reason to not go to the gym, because like it's an allergic reaction. Can't purposely go seeking out allergic reactions now, but I can go to the doctor, get my immune system sorted out, get it in check, and then go to the gym and continue performing my routine of going to the gym.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's just things like waking up in the morning, for example. Let's say you wake up in the morning, that's your cue, right? Your routine is you're going to check your phone, and then you're probably going to feel good because you were procrastinating and you were just chilling, wasting time on your phone, and that's the reward you're going to get. However, you can change that. Your cue's still going to be you waking up in the morning, and the reward can still be you get that same feeling, but you change the routine to get that feeling. And there's different routines that get you different feelings. Brushing your teeth makes your mouth feel clean. Taking a shower makes you feel clean. Making your bed makes you feel somewhat organized. Those are all good feelings, right? And they are rooted, those feelings are rooted in the routine. So because different routines will give you different rewards.
Yeah.
And that's how you can kind of like mash up your habit. If you want to change your habits, you can kind of approach it in that way by keeping the cues the same, but changing the routine to achieve that same reward.
So now, one of the things that I know that we wanted to do, particularly on this podcast, is make sure that whatever it is that we do, or
we implement it in our lives.
Yeah, not even just implement it in our lives, but even make sure that the example that we give is somewhat practical. So I think the social media one is a very practical one, because I mean most of us do it. Like you wake up, first thing you do is pick up your phone.
Exactly.
And I think what we would then need to identify is like, what is the reward you get from doing so? I don't know if it's so much so. I wouldn't say that the reward is procrastinating, but it's more. Okay. I wouldn't say that the reward is. Shame, do you want to just like stop that?
Yeah, it stopped.
Okay, stop. It's fine. Cool.
It stopped, yeah.
I wouldn't say that the reward is so much procrastination, but there is a reward that comes from it. And I think identifying what the reward, like.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I think that's also important to know is what the reward is.
What is it that you're getting from it?
And that's being aware. So I don't know what reward it is that you get from scrolling on your phone. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it releases.
Like I know the chemical. We know it's dopamine, but like if we look at any reward, that's what it's neurochemically rooted in. It's dopamine response. So like
that is,
technically that's the neurochemical reward, but it's not the same thing as saying the reward for brushing your teeth is the nice breath. There's definitely a dopamine response, but the manifested reward of that dopamine response is a nice breath. The same way the manifested response of going to the gym is feeling that pump. There's a dopamine release, but the manifestation of that is the pump that you feel.
It's probably relaxing. But it's that thing of like, yes, I'm chilling on my phone.
But those sorry, just to interrupt you, but like those sort of activities act on like different circuits of the brain as well, because you get the easier ones, like the cheap dopamines, which are like going on your phone, on social media, or drinking alcohol, and you get an immediate feel-good response. But then things like gymming and brushing your teeth, as much as they do manifest in a form of dopamine, but mainly they kind of have a long-term effect. So they act more like your serotonin and so on like that. So that's why I think that it's a bit hard to adjust in that way with the new habits, because you don't get that response. I think it's also the fact that it's just biochemical.
No, I understand.
I completely get where you're coming from. Yeah. I think it's important to kind of like understand that, because yes, you can boil them all as biochemical responses that we get from all activities that we do. But there are certain things that give you a certain response, and that's why you get those ones. For example, the book that I read, he was talking about Febreze. I don't know if you know what Febreze is, but Febreze is basically like a air freshener. It's an air freshener.
Oh, Febreze,
Febreze.
Yeah.
Febreze. I said it wrong.
I don't know.
I butchered the
I don't
name.
even know the brand.
I don't know.
It's not in South Africa.
I
I don't think it's in South
I
Africa.
don't think it is. I think I heard it. I think I heard it on TV once, and they look like Febreze.
We have Eric and Glade. Eric and Glade.
Boy.
But yeah, no. So that's exactly the approach that they took with their company, and toothpaste companies have done the same thing, and shampoo companies have also done the same thing. Which is you getting that reward, not necessarily that dopamine hit, but there's that reward, that thing that you get now. And I'll use an example. Toothpaste doesn't need to taste like mint.
Yeah.
There's no benefit for it. It's just the taste, and that's the reward that they.
It's the same thing with soap.
That's the reward.
I think soap is also a very good example.
Shampoo.
There's literally no reason for it to bubble that much.
Yes. Yeah.
But the
it
reason
makes you feel clean.
It genuinely makes you think that you're
clean.
getting cleaner.
Yeah.
But you'll see, for example, glycerine soaps, they barely bubble. And they're like very proper. They're really proper soaps. So that's, I think that he's alluding exactly to what I'm speaking about. Like, we understand that at a chemical level, the reward is dopamine.
Yeah.
The long-term reward is serotonin. Cool. That we understand at a chemical level. But on the physical manifestation of that reward. So, for example, if you decide you want to buy a fast car, the reward for that is I get to drive fast and feel good in driving fast. And that's a dopamine response that you get there. So
but the reward is the
driving fast.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why I'm asking, what is the reward you get from scrolling on social media?
I think it's chilling.
Is it like comforting? Is it relaxing?
It's just chilling. Like you're just chilling, you know? Like if you're stressed out, you're going to do it more because you want to chill.
Yeah,
that's
sort of like an
true.
avoidance.
It's, yes. There's an avoidance. Yes. I think that's a good way to put it. It's like it dissipates stress in a weird way. Like it's just...
Yeah.
So then, okay, cool. So if we can identify that as the reward that we're craving and the cue's waking up, what would be an adequate replacement?
Reading. You could read.
Okay.
You could go for a walk.
Yeah.
You know, those are things that are like makes you relax, makes you chill, and whatever. Obviously, in the beginning, it's gonna be difficult because it's like all habits all habits that you're trying to form. You're gonna be met with some sort of a resistance. Yeah. And your body's gonna be like, "Hey, dude, just scroll on the phone for a bit, man.
Yeah.
Just going into WhatsApp won't hurt. Still messaged me." But that's how you can keep the cue and the reward the same, but change the routine.
Okay. So for example, so I think, because now I want to try some of these things, and I want to make sure it's things that like we could actually try and come back and say, I tried this and this. So we said reading. We're really trying to do that here. I mean, that's basically why we started the podcast.
Yeah.
Genuinely why we started the whole podcast.
I am being met with resistance,
bro.
Man.
Resistance.
Bro.
Like, you open that first page, man, and you just like...
I have to.
Dude, you know when you're like reading a paragraph and then you're like, I don't know what I read.
Yo,
you have to
don't
read
even
it again. And then it just becomes a daunting experience, dude. And then you're like, let me just put the book one side. I'll read it when I'm in a better mood.
I just...
No, like you're actually speaking so many... Like it's painful, man.
Hey, dude.
Just gotta go for it, though.
I love how you just changed the accent. like I was just gonna make it. Just gotta go for it, though.
Just go for it.
Oh my god.
No, I'm joking, man. But I think, you know what, then you gotta also speak about why it's difficult for people to form habits, because I also think a reason why it is hard for people to form habits because you kind of goal orientated. Like as much as you are reading the book, you might be thinking, okay, I want to get to this chapter. Which is good, but you shouldn't have like a goal first sort of mentality, because a goal is essentially an outcome, whereas the habit is the system or the actions behind you achieving that outcome.
Falling in love with the process.
You're falling in love with the process, essentially. So I think that's also like a big reason why it may be hard to like form new habits, is that you're kind of focused on maybe the goal and so on. And I'd like to like lead in kind of going into like reasons why people may struggle also in terms of forming new habits. And one reason that I learned a lot in this book was this phenomenon called the survivorship bias. I think I told you about it last year. So that bias is basically like, in life, winners and losers have the same goal. Like if you and I apply for a job, we both want to get
the goal
job.
is to get the job.
The job. And let's say you get the job, then you kind of known as the guy who got the job. So in life, we kind of only see the people that succeed, and we never really see the ones that fail, which creates that survivorship bias. But the thing is, we both had the same goal. So nothing really separates us. The goal doesn't separate us, essentially. But what does separate us is what we did in order to achieve that goal. So perhaps your CV is a lot more extensive and tailored for their liking versus my own. Maybe I don't have that experience. So I think that also when you're trying to form new habits, you need to understand that, okay, there's a lot of work that has to go into achieving whatever goal that you have, as opposed to that. And also like having like a goal is just a momentary thing. Like it doesn't really change much in your life. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you wake up in the morning and you see that your room is messy, you like conjure up energy to kind of clean it up. Then you clean it up. Anyway, it looks good.
Your goal would be to have a clean room.
It would be to have a clean
basically.
room. Yeah, that's the goal, would be to have a clean room. And then you're just like, okay, you know what? Let me just clean this damn room.
But someone who cleans their room out of habit. Or just as they wake up, they do this thing. Yeah, you know, I'm more intentional about having to clean my room. Hence why my room will be more messy than someone who isn't more intentional about it. Is that what you're trying to...
No, so it's not necessarily like it'll be more messy. It's like the consistency that comes with it, because you're more focused on the outcome of it being clean, as opposed to what it would do for you going forward, as we discussed earlier on. Like you having that habit of cleaning your room doesn't end at you just cleaning your room. It probably means, okay, you're gonna go downstairs, shower, brush your teeth in a good manner, whatever. Essentially just have like sort of a systematic way of going on about your day. Whereas if you don't clean your room, you already like kind of on a back foot, and you don't realize that there may be things that you're not doing, but setting that habit in kind of has that trickling effect. So if you just focused on the goal of cleaning your room, it's going to be hard for you to do that consistently. It's just going to change for that moment where you're like, I want to clean room, and then you clean the room. But if you're somebody who cleans your room because you understand, if I clean my room, that means I'm going to come back home and it's clean. I don't have to worry about it being dirty. Or if I clean my room, that means, okay, fine, I can go for my run and everything will be good. So it kind of being aware of that trickling effect that it has.
I get what you're saying, because it's like, it's easy to clean your room when you want your room clean, but what happens on the days where you don't really care if it's clean or not?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now the motivation to do it is not there. And I think that's where we often wane, where it's like, because the motivate or like the goal is so superficial and it's somewhat mood based. If you don't want, if right now what you want is not a clean room and your room is messy, it's very easy to just let it be that.
Yeah, exactly that.
And I can speak from experience as somebody who used to always have a dirty room, to now I think more often than not my room has been clean. And I think it's as you said, like it's genuinely I don't even do it because I want to have a clean room. It's like I do it because I don't want the stress of not having my life together.
Yeah.
It's a completely different thing now.
Yeah.
It's genuinely like, as soon as I get back home, I do not want to stress about, where am I going to lie down? Where am I going to be able to put my stuff now? Because everything's on the bed.
You're trying to work, but there's too much stuff on the table.
All those things. Because
that's a bunch of clothes in. Like,
dude,
I need to clean this stuff.
And then all of a sudden, the work doesn't get done just because of
that.
I didn't clean my room.
And that adds more stress. Now you're stressed out. You didn't do your work.
And then cleaning my room becomes procrastination. And then all of a sudden, things that shouldn't even be goals now become the goal. Like suddenly, I'm shifting that self-control that we spoke about earlier. Now the self-control goes from the self-control needed to go and study to the self-control I need to go clean the room. And I expend it there, and then more often than not, when it's time to study, I've already accomplished something, man.
Literally, it's just
I've accomplished, man.
You've got your goal.
I worked hard.
And that also leads into like one reason why it's also this was a while, and this guy says that goals restrict your happiness. And it's because when you have a goal, you kind of have an implicit assumption that once you've reached that goal, you're gonna be happy.
Ooh.
So here you are, you just cleaned your room, you're like, okay, I'm happy, I'm done. You probably are happy, but there's still a lot more that you have to do, and you kind of cut yourself short at that point. So he says that, essentially if you do that, you just kind of withholding yourself from happiness if you continue.
I remember
celebrating at off time.
I remember a book by Naval Ravikant, the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, speaks about something very similar. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he basically spoke about desire basically being the enemy of happiness. Like, basically he was saying that every desire you have is you committing to being unhappy until you get it.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Because if you think about it, up until the point at which you have this thing, you feel unfulfilled.
Yeah, you feel empty, like you're missing something.
Like you're missing something. And I can speak from experience. One of the big desires I have right now is to flip and graduate, bro. I'm so sick of mid school.
So personal. But it's on the contrary, on the flip side of that, of having these desires or this goal-oriented approach, because the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there's the 7 habits. 7 habits of highly effective people. Yes, that stuff. There's one habit that says begin with the end in mind. Yeah, one of the habits is begin with the end in mind. Yeah. So, and I think that's a good approach to have, because Jordan Peterson also alludes to it in a lot of his content, and that is that if you have like this goal or this outcome, let's say for example you want to be an athlete, you understand that your body fat composition needs to be minimal, depending on the sport obviously, but your body fat composition needs to be minimal. You need to be able to run so fast and whatever if you want to be at that level or achieving at that level, right? And it's a good, having that goal-oriented approach is a good place to begin, because it now sets you with something to aim towards. Because as you said, we're goal-driven species organisms. Technically an organism, but we very much goal oriented. And the thing is that we like to look at it from the side of you only get the good feeling when you get the goal, but that's not true. You get the good feeling making movement towards that goal. So like for example, if I want to run a marathon, yes, me running the marathon is going to give me that ultimately good feeling. Or playing in a World Cup final, me winning the trophy is the ultimately good feeling that I want. But I understand that to get there, I need to score goals. And those are going to be those small rewards that I get. Getting to that goal, which is going to help me get to that goal, because it now gives me that, you get that reward in your approach to that goal.
I certainly understand what you're saying. And it's like, what I was saying is not to say that don't be goal orientated. Like, you need goals, because as you said, it gives you something to aim at. Goals are there to give you direction, but it's just that when you're now in pursuit of the goal, you can't just always necessarily be looking at it, because as you say, you can, if you're not moving actively towards it, or you're failing at some point in time, you may feel unhappy, you'll feel unfulfilled until you've achieved that goal. So you have to deal with all of those kind of emotional or internal dilemmas while you're kind of in pursuit of that goal.
So I think
that's true.
Yeah.
That's,
so I think an important thing that I'm like picking up here is, number one, the foundation of this is to understand that like failure is going to be a very big part of this. And I think understanding that definitely means that when you've at least expected it, it's not as devastating when it comes. But then the second thing is, the goal needs to be very carefully chosen, in that the goal can't be something that is fleeting, in the sense that it comes and goes with emotion. Because I think once the goal is attached to something that is fleeting, like emotion, it means if the emotion needed to drive you towards that goal is not there, you won't ever achieve it. Or even if you do achieve it and you don't get the emotional response that you want, you then end up feeling unfulfilled when you do get to that goal, which is very important.
Yeah, I think that's why it's also important to, like, you used to have this post in your room that, I don't know if you still do, but it says, be present.
Be present, yeah.
Yeah, be present. And you kind of always have to be present. In that, yes, you're pursuing a goal, but don't take what you have now for granted.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of need to be grateful for what you have. And I think it's important to kind of have that end goal, that big end goal, because, you know, there's that saying, you aim for the stars and land on the moon, or aim for the moon and land on, I don't know how it goes, but yeah. Aim for the stars and land on the moon.
You're landing somewhere.
You're landing somewhere.
Yeah, it's landing somewhere.
It's not Earth.
And that place is much more further than where you were initially. For example, children do this all the time. And I'm going to use sports again. Kylian Mbappe, growing up, there's a picture of him in his room, and on the wall there's a picture of Cristiano Ronaldo. Right? So that's kind of his goal. He wants to be Cristiano Ronaldo. And who knows, maybe it'll be him, maybe it'll be better than Ronaldo by the time his career ends. But it's a goal, it's something to strive towards.
Yeah. And
you could see, like, as he's growing up and getting older and progressing in the sport, he's gonna get those rewards. That kind of validation that you're on the path, keep going. And that's because he has that end goal in mind, I think.
No, you're right. I definitely don't. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, you do have to have some direction that you're aiming at, because if you don't, then you kind of just shooting aimlessly and you don't know if you're actually succeeding or failing. So as you said, like,
you're blinding yourself.
Yeah, it's willful blindness.
Yeah, willful blindness.
Would call it.
So I think then, if we're looking at goals, I think goals are ultimately, again, because I want to also bring this back to the whole habits thing. So goals are ultimately like the point at which I guess we can say the change has been somewhat achieved. So it's like, this is what change looks like for you. Change can either be, I didn't have a world championship, now I do. Or I didn't have a car, now I do. Or I wasn't somebody who was consistently gymming, now I am. Or I didn't have the body I wanted, now I do. So that's what the goal is. It's ultimately the point at which you've changed. The habits, what drove you there. And I think this then helps us understand why habits are so important.
Yeah, that's actually spot on.
Yeah, the habits are what take you there. And then if we break the habit further down, there are components within habits that we need to be actively aware of to make sure that we are fulfilling the loop properly. And we're fulfilling loops that take us towards where we actually want to go to. So that loop being the cue, the
routine.
Oh, gosh.
Who you going with?
Don't do that to me, man.
You gotta pick James, bro. Come on, Jamie.
Hey, man, I like the fact that this one has more steps in it. So
more steps.
There's more interventions, man.
Yeah, but my guy says that the craving comes later on.
Okay,
he says that the craving does come later on. It's not something you crave now.
Okay.
You know, like if I'm going to the gym, if I start going to the gym now, I'm not going to crave the gym now.
Until it's become a habit.
Yeah. And then
that's
that habit loop and the consistent getting the reward, that's when it becomes a craving.
Okay.
I think the craving tends to come in quicker depending on how quickly the reward came as well.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it again, like when you use social media, you can have been off social media for like 6 months, bro. You come back on for 2 days. All of a sudden, like like that craving, it's so quick. It's so quick because the response, the reward that you get is so quick. But the gymming is not the same. Like, hey, bruh, you'll be working the same body part for 3 months. It still doesn't look like it moved, you know?
Literally.
And so, like, you, again, and I think this is where what you spoke about becomes very important, which is the goal also needs to make sense in that it has to be something that isn't going to be attached to like a fleeting emotion. Because if you can't see the progress immediately or even after 3 months, which is a pretty considerable amount of time, then it's very easy to now quit at that particular point. But if the goal is something deeper and something more, I think, holistically oriented, for example, yes, it's perfectly fine to say that you want to have a good body. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's also it's also a lot more important to also understand that you want to live healthy. And that comes with a myriad of other benefits that long outweigh and outlive just the moment of looking good, because the confidence that comes from being healthy, very key. It makes it easier for you to make healthier decisions as well, because you don't want to deviate from that. All the hard work that you're putting in the gym only for you to like let it go in places that don't matter, you know. So I think it's also very important that when defining the goal has to be something that can withstand the test of emotion. And the reason I say the test of emotion is because that thing will weather you down because of how much it goes up and down. So it's very important for us to make sure that when defining the goal that the habits are meant to bring us towards, the goal is something that is not fleeting.
No, 100%, because you need to make sure that the goal is not fleeting. Because I know that I've spoken to someone who just graduated last year and she was like, oh, wow. I didn't think graduation was going to be like this. And I was like, why? It's like, no, it's a little bit underwhelming. I'm like, why does it feel underwhelming? Like you're finally done, isn't it? Doesn't it feel like you finally finished the race or something? And she was like, no. And James speaks about it. When you look at when you're wanting something, when you crave something, we normally have dopamine released in our brains. And then when you finally get that reward, depending on what reward it will be, obviously if you're drinking alcohol, then the chemicals are going to be released quickly. You're probably going to be happy. So which is easy, like things that you can sort of get addicted to easily kind of give you a quick reward. But the reason why when you get to the end of your goal and it somewhat feels underwhelming is there also like parts in your brain which don't transcend as much of the brain tissue as much as the dopamine pathways do. So when you finally finish that goal, the satisfaction that you get from it is nowhere near the craving that you had initially had. And that's why you may feel as if, oh no, it's not really as great as I thought it would be. But that's also because like neurobiologically, your brain is wired to be more dopaminergic, essentially, I would say. Yeah. So that's one thing I can say also about goals. Like you can get to the end and you may not be as satisfied.
I think that's very important. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like with goals, the nice thing about goals is that I think a good approach to have is that a goal should never have a full stop at the end of it. You know? It should never just be, I want to graduate. You know? Then what? You graduate and then it's gonna be like, okay, now what? Do I just stop now or
full stop? I like
or
that.
what? Yeah, so it's just something that you need to keep moving forward. As what's his name? Matthew McConaughey. I'm butchering his surname. Matthew McConaughey. Is it Matthew McConaughey?
I don't know, bro.
The actor.
McConaughey, bro.
The actor.
Hey man, now you just said Marginal.
The guy that does that.
Yeah.
In Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, I know who you're talking about, but I don't know how to say his name.
But him,
McConaughey. I think it's McConaughey. I don't know.
Matthew M.
It's just if he doesn't see this.
Matthew M. Yeah,
Okay.
so in his, I think he won an award, and in his acceptance speech, he said that people always ask him, he told the story, and it was like, people always ask me like, who do I want to be when I grow up? And I told them I want to be me 10 years from now. And then when this 10 years came, they were like, oh, did you wanted to be? It's like, no, my hero is 10 years ahead of me. So like no matter which point you you are, you need to keep your goal ahead of you, because that's going to keep you moving forward.
Yeah.
It's not, it shouldn't be something, it's not a destination.
Yeah.
A goal should not be a destination.
Should always be a direction.
It should always be a direction.
Yeah.
I remember hearing somebody saying that success is not a destination, it's a direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty fitting way to put it, because I mean, even now, I spoke about the frustration of like wanting to graduate, but I can tell you now, like it's, hey man, just this first month of school felt particularly difficult, because like this thing of wanting it to be done was somewhat sucking the life out of being here right now.
And it's so close.
And it's so painfully close. And I think one of the things that I'm a bit worried about is that if I don't get this under control, like this craving for it to be done, is that when it is done, it's like, yo, it's a bit underwhelming, like she said.
It's underwhelming, yeah.
You know, and I really don't want it to be that. So I think this is also definitely kind of like reminding me, like, hey, it's okay to want the end goal of the graduation, because we've been here for so long, but I'm not there yet. And I think if I continue to live in a future that I have not yet like experienced, I lose so much of the present right now, and I end up forming a habit that is built on just craving, you know, with absolutely no fulfillment of the loop. I will just perpetually be craving, and I think that's going to leave me depleted, that's going to leave me unhappy. And I think it's a very important thing for me to note now, so that I don't find myself in a position where the rest of med school just feels like dismal, you know.
No, 100%. Yeah, it's good to like just shift your mind frame for that, so that it's easier for you to get through it. All right.
But yeah, no, I think today's conversation was definitely very fruitful in terms of being able to I think quite thoroughly identify what habits are, why they're important, and I think we even started touching on somewhat how to build them. And I think in our next episode, we're definitely going to delve a lot deeper into the mechanisms by which we build habits, and I think even identify where people tend to fail. I think that's going to be a very important part of the next episode, so that it's not just so that people can troubleshoot, because I think it's very important for us to know that when you're engaging in something difficult, usually failures are even part of the process, and it's a normal part of the process.
So it's part of the learning as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
It gives you a good point to like look back to and say, okay,
this is what must change.
This is what needs to change.
Exactly. You know, so in doing so, I think we'll be able to give a better framework as to how to go about creating these habits, where the shortfalls tend to be, and even just like what are the things that motivate us to create those habits in the first place. Because I think that's also another thing that's very important, in that I think we'll expand on it more. But for example, we might go to the gym for completely different reasons. You know, there are people who go to the gym simply because it's on the schedule for them to do, and it's just part of getting the day done. They know that it has to happen. There are other people who go to the gym because they have a partner that they go to the gym with, and they don't want to let them down. You know, two things that have completely different goals but have similar outcomes, being you're healthier by going to the gym. So I think in identifying what it is that motivates you to create a habit will also be very important. And I think we'll be very glad to break all of that down in our next episode. So yeah, I don't know if there's any final comments from you guys.
No, I think today was a good episode today.
Yeah,
it was a good starting point in terms of habits, and I think that we've kind of set the tone as to where we can go over the next 2 episodes.
No, fully go.
No, I don't have any more comments. I'd agree. I think we fleshed out what habits are and touched a bit on why people struggle on forming habits. So it's been good.
No, we love to see it then. So this was a lovely pilot episode.
Literally,
I had to put the pilot in, man. So we really want to thank you guys for just taking the time to even watch this episode and be on this journey with us. As we said, I mean, a lot of this is for us to be able to break down the things that we want to learn in our respective lives and just share that journey with you. So yeah, we want to thank you so much for joining us on the first episode, and we look forward to seeing you guys again. This is the part where you do your favorite thing.
Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.
Comment.
Please comment.
Comment. Please don't forget to comment.
Thanks, guys.